In the biting chill of a 1930s English winter, the manor of Harrington Hall stood isolated under a blanket of fresh snow. No footprint marred the pristine white expanse, save for a single trail leading to the frozen gazebo at the garden's heart. There, sprawled in crimson-stained snow, lay Sir Reginald Harrington, dead, a dagger in his chest. The storm had raged all night, sealing the estate like a tomb. Who could have reached him without leaving tracks? As the guests gathered in horror, a small Belgian detective with a waxed moustache stepped forward. "Messieurs et mesdames," said Hercule Poirot, "the little grey cells, they awaken." Chapter 1. The Arrival at Harrington Hall. The train exhaled a long, mournful sigh as it slowed into the little country station of Upper Winchcombe, its iron wheels crunching over frost-rimed rails. It was the 23rd of December, 1935, and the sky hung low and pewter-coloured, pregnant with snow. Captain Arthur Hastings pressed his forehead to the cold glass of the compartment window and watched the platform slide into view. A single gas lamp flickering like a dying star, a porter hunched in a woolen balaclava, and beyond the iron palings a white world that seemed to have forgotten the existence of colour. "Mon ami," came the precise, slightly nasal voice from the opposite seat, "you contemplate the scenery with the air of one who expects it to confess a crime." Hercule Poirot folded Le Figaro with geometrical exactitude and tucked it into the pocket of his perfectly tailored overcoat. His small, neat feet in their patent leather shoes were encased in grey woolen spats. His moustaches, those magnificent symmetrical moustaches, were waxed to such rigidity that they might have served as spirit levels. A green malachite tie-pin glinted against the dove-grey of his waistcoat. Even in the dim carriage light he contrived to look immaculate, as though the very idea of dishevelment were an insult to the order of the universe. Hastings smiled. "I was merely thinking how remote the place is. Harrington Hall, 3 miles from the village," the telegram said, "and the road's already drifting. If the snow deepens, we shall be cut off for days." "Précisément," Poirot replied, rising with the compact energy of a watch spring. "Isolation, the classic condition for murder. One arrives, one cannot depart, and somewhere among the company a serpent waits in the basket of figs." The porter touched his cap. "Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings? The motor's waiting, sir, though the driver says the lane's none too clever. Sir Reginald's man telephoned to say the house party's already assembled." Hastings shouldered their valises, while Poirot, with the delicacy of a cat, descended onto the platform. The air struck like a blade, dry, crystalline, scented faintly of coal smoke and pine. Snowflakes the size of sixpences began to drift from the iron ribs of the station roof. The motor was a stately Rolls-Royce Phantom II, its black coachwork dusted with white, its radiator capped with a silver spirit of ecstasy, already wearing a tiny coronet of frost. The chauffeur, a taciturn fellow named Briggs, opened the door with a bow that managed to be both deferential and disapproving. "Evening, gentlemen. Mind the step ice." They slid into fragrant warmth, Morocco leather cigar residue, the faint perfume of hot oil. As the car purred forward, the headlights carved tunnels through the swirling dark. Bare oaks lined the lane like sentinels, their branches clutched at the sky with skeletal fingers. Poirot removed his Homburg and placed it on the seat beside him. "Tell me again, Hastings, the composition of this little reunion." Hastings drew the telegram from his pocket and smoothed it on his knee. "Arrive 23rd for Yuletide house party. Stop urgent matter. Requires your discretion. Stop all will be explained. Stop Harrington." Sir Reginald Harrington, Hastings recited, 55 baronet, owner of Harrington Steel and Munitions. Made a packet during the war, another during rearmament. Married to Lady Evelyn, née Carstairs. Old county family, no money. One son, Geoffrey, 26, something of a wastrel. The others are guests, Mr. Victor Langford. Business partner, Dr. Elias Crowe. Old friend of the family, Miss Clara Thorne. Lady's maid to Lady Evelyn, but invited as a guest this year. Odd that, and ourselves. Odd indeed, murmured Poirot. A maid elevated to the drawing-room. Either great loyalty, or a secret that must be concealed in plain sight. And the urgent matter, phrased with delicacy, yet underlined twice. Sir Reginald fears something, or someone. The rolls laboured up a final incline, and the gates of Harrington Hall appeared. Wrought iron, gilded crest, flanked by stone griffins wearing top hats of snow. Beyond, the drive wound between rhododendrons bowed under their burden like penitents. Then the house itself rose into view, a prodigy of Tudor grandeur. Black beams and rosy brick, mullioned windows glowing amber against the night. Smoke plumed from a dozen chimneys, only to be shredded by the wind. Briggs drew up beneath the porte-cochere. Lanterns swung in the gale. Footmen in bottle-green livery darted forward with umbrellas. Poirot descended first, surveying the facade with the air of a general reviewing troops. Symmetrical, he approved, yet the east wing has been rebuilt. See the newer brick? A fire, perhaps, or an addition to conceal something. One must always consider the architecture, Hastings. It is the skeleton upon which the flesh of motive is draped. A butler of immense dignity, white side whiskers, the posture of a ramrod, awaited them in the entrance hall. The air was warm, resinous with burning applewood, spiced with beeswax and holly. A vast Christmas tree reared in the minstrel's gallery, hung with crystal icicles that chimed softly in the draught. Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings, Sir Reginald begs you will forgive the informality of dress. Dinner is at 8, but he craves a word beforehand. If you would follow me to the library. They traversed a corridor panelled in dark oak, past ancestral portraits whose eyes seemed to follow with the weary resignation of the long dead. Suits of armour stood at intervals, visors lowered as though guarding secrets. The butler threw open double doors. The library was a cathedral of books, leather spines glowing like stained glass, a fire roaring in a stone hearth carved with the Harrington arms. Sir Reginald stood before it, a tall man running to fat, his dinner jacket straining at the seams. His face was florid, the nose veined with burgundy, but the eyes, pale blue, restless, betrayed a mind that had not slept well in months. "Poirot!" He strode forward, hand extended. "Devilish good of you to come. And Captain Hastings, delighted. Sherry? Brandy? You'll need something after that infernal journey." Poirot inclined his head. "A tisane, perhaps, if it is not too much trouble. The cold, it constricts the little grey cells." Sir Reginald barked a laugh that held no mirth. "Cells, eh? You'll need 'em. Damned queer business." He glanced at the butler. "That'll be all, Meadows." The doors closed with ecclesiastical finality. Sir Reginald poured himself a stiff whisky. "I won't beat about the bush. Someone in this house wants me dead." Hastings felt the familiar prickle at the nape of his neck. Poirot merely raised an eyebrow. "You dramatize, monsieur?" "Wish to God I did." Sir Reginald gulped his drink. 3 attempts in as many months. First, my hunter shied at a jump. Wire stretched across the path. Second, a brick from the old chimney pot crashed through the conservatory roof where I take my morning coffee. Third, He opened a drawer and produced a small glass vial. "Strychnine in my digestive powders. Enough to kill a regiment. Chemist swears the seal was intact when it left his shop." Poirot took the vial, held it to the firelight. "And the local police? Country constables. Good for poachers. Useless for this, besides." Sir Reginald lowered his voice. "The attempts must come from within. The wire was cut from my own fencing stores. The brick dislodged from inside the chimney. The powders tampered with after delivery. My household, Poirot, someone under this roof." He paced, glass clinking against his rings. "I've watched them all. My wife, Evelyn, sweet woman, but she married beneath her, or so her family said. Needs money for her charities, her dresses. My son Geoffrey, debts at half the clubs in St. James's. Victor Langford, my partner, thinks I've cheated him on the new armaments contract. Dr. Crow, old friend, but I ruined him years ago in a speculation. Even the maid, Clara Thorne, pretty little thing, too pretty. Caught her once in my study after hours." Poirot twirled his moustache. "And yet you invite them all for Christmas? Better to have the devils where I can see them, and you, Poirot, to watch, discreetly. I'll double your usual fee." Poirot's eyes gleamed like winter stars. "Triple, monsieur, considering the season, and the risk. Done." Sir Reginald drained his glass. "Now, come and meet the vipers before they strike again." They emerged into the great hall where the house party had assembled for pre-dinner drinks. Crystals sparkled, logs hissed, a gramophone played a languid foxtrot. Heads turned. Lady Evelyn Harrington glided forward first, 40, still beautiful in the way of fading roses, her gown of midnight velvet setting off a rope of pearls that must have cost a Rajah's ransom. Her smile was practiced, but her fingers worried the stem of her cocktail glass. "Mr. Poirot, how thrilling! Reginald has told us nothing, of course, but one hears things." Her voice was light, but her eyes flicked to her husband with the wariness of a deer scenting the hunter. Geoffrey lounged by the fireplace, a young man with his father's height but none of his vigour. Fair hair slicked back, eyes bloodshot, a cigarette perpetually drooping. "The great detective," he drawled. "Going to tell us who's been naughty?" Victor Langford was built like a bull. Thick neck, broken nose, a diamond the size of a hailstone in his tie. He pumped Poirot's hand with bruising enthusiasm. "Heard you sorted out that business on the Orient Express. Capital! Though if anyone's express needs derailing here, it's old Harrington's conscience." Dr. Elias Crow stood apart, tall and cadaverous, his black evening suit hanging on him like a shroud. His eyes were deep-set, burning with the cold fire of the fanatic. "Monsieur Poirot," he said softly, "I trust you bring more than curiosity. Some sins require a physician of the soul." Finally, Miss Clara Thorne, 25, auburn hair coiled beneath a lace cap though she wore no apron tonight, a simple green frock that clung to a figure more suited to Mayfair than domestic service. She curtsied, cheeks flushing. "Sir, Captain." Her voice held the faintest trace of the West Country. Poirot bowed to each in turn, his gaze missing nothing. The tremor in Lady Evelyn's hand, the whisky on Geoffrey's breath, the bulge of Langford's wallet, the scalpel-sharp crease in Dr. Crow's cuff, the tiny scar on Miss Thorne's wrist where a bracelet had once bitten. Dinner was announced. They processed into the baronial dining hall. A hammer-beam roof black with age, a table long enough for a banquet of ghosts. Silver epergnon glittered, candelabra flickered, a boar's head grinned from the sideboard, apples in its jaws. Poirot was placed at Sir Reginald's right, Hastings opposite. Conversation flowed like thin ice over deep water. "To absent friends," Sir Reginald toasted, raising his glass. The crystal trembled slightly in his grip. Geoffrey smirked. "And to present enemies." Lady Evelyn's laugh was brittle. "Really, darling, must we?" Langford carved the roast beef with unnecessary violence. "Speaking of enemies, Reggie, those new contracts. Ministry's asking questions about the figures." Sir Reginald's jaw tightened. "Later, Victor." Dr. Crow murmured, almost to himself, "Figures lie when men do." Miss Thorne, seated below the salt though above the footman, kept her eyes on her plate, but Hastings noticed her glance dart to Sir Reginald whenever she thought no one watched. Poirot ate delicately. A morsel of beef, a sip of claret, his attention elsewhere. Between courses, he leaned toward his host. The wire, the brick, the poison, each method different. Either an amateur growing desperate, or a professional varying his approach. "Tell me, monsieur, have you changed your will recently?" The question hung like a dagger. Sir Reginald's fork paused halfway to his mouth. "As a matter of fact, yes. Last month. Left everything to Evelyn. Geoffrey's to get a stipend if he mends his ways. The boy's been forging my name." Geoffrey flushed crimson. "Keep your voice down, father." Lady Evelyn laid a gloved hand on her husband's arm. "Reginald, please, not at table." But Poirot's eyes had moved to Miss Thorne. The girl had gone white as the table linen. A pulse beat visibly in her throat. Dessert arrived. Plum pudding, flaming blue, brandy butter, crystallized fruits. The gramophone in the hall struck up Winter Wonderland. Snow tapped insistently at the leaded windows like a messenger refused admittance. Coffee was served in the drawing-room. Poirot declined a cigar, but accepted a liqueur glass of Cointreau, which he nursed like a relic. The party fragmented into uneasy knots. Geoffrey cornered Langford by the tree, voices low and angry. Dr. Crow stood before a portrait of Sir Reginald's father, staring as though at a sworn enemy. Lady Evelyn played Scarlatti on the pianoforte, the notes brittle. Miss Thorne slipped away to fetch her ladyship's wrap. Poirot murmured to Hastings, "Observe the currents beneath the surface, mon ami. The son gambles away his future. The partner smells betrayal. The doctor nurses an old wound. The wife clings to dignity. The maid is the enigma. Why does she tremble when the will is mentioned?" Midnight chimed from the long case clock in the hall. Sir Reginald rose, glass in hand. "My friends, a toast to Christmas, and to truths that will out, like holly through snow." He drank deeply. For a moment the firelight caught the facets of his glass, splintering into crimson shards. Then he swayed. The glass slipped from his fingers, shattering on the parquet. He clutched his throat, eyes bulging. "Reginald!" Lady Evelyn screamed. He pitched forward, crashing across the coffee table in a cascade of cups and brandy. Dr. Crow was first to reach him, kneeling, fingers at the carotid. "Poison," he said grimly. "Convulsions beginning. Too late for emetics." Sir Reginald's body arched once, twice, then lay still. The fire crackled on, indifferent. Hastings stared, horrified. Poirot alone remained seated, his small hands steady as he set down his untouched Cointreau. "Non, docteur," he said quietly, "not poison. Observe the lips, no cyanosis, the eyes, no pinpoint pupils. This is not strychnine, nor prussic acid. This is—" He leaned forward, sniffed the spilled whiskey on the carpet. "Nothing. A performance." Sir Reginald groaned, rolled over, sat up. His face was ashen but alive. "Reginald!" Lady Evelyn flew to him. He waved her away, eyes fixed on Poirot. "Well, convincing enough." "Most convincing," Poirot replied, "but unnecessary." Your enemies, monsieur, are now convinced you fear poison above all things. A dangerous game." Geoffrey laughed shakily. "Father, you old devil!" Langford looked shaken. Dr. Crow's face was a mask. Miss Thorne, returning with the wrap, froze in the doorway, eyes wide. Sir Reginald struggled to his feet. I had to know who'd gloat, who'd look relieved. His gaze raked the room, and now I do. Poirot rose. Then the play had served its purpose, but the curtain is not yet fallen. Captain Hastings and I will retire. Tomorrow, the investigation proper begins. As they climbed the grand staircase, Hastings whispered, "Was it really necessary to terrify everyone?" "Necessary?" Poirot's eyes glittered in the sconce light. "Indispensable. Fear is the great revealer of truth, Hastings, and tonight, fear has shown me 3 faces that lied." Behind them, the fire settled into embers. Outside, the snow began to fall in earnest, thick and silent, erasing the world beyond the windows. Somewhere in the house, a door closed with the finality of a coffin lid. In their adjoining rooms, Poirot stood at the casement, watching the flakes obliterate the drive. "Tomorrow," he said softly, "the tracks will tell their story, but tonight, mon ami, the house itself listens, and somewhere within its walls the serpent stirs." Hastings drew the curtains against the white dark. "You think the attempts were real?" "Oh, yes. The wire, the brick, the strychnine. Those were genuine. Tonight's charade was merely the overture." "The opera!" Poirot turned, his silhouette sharp against the firelight. "The opera begins with the first death, and I, Hercule Poirot, shall be both conductor and detective." He twirled his moustache one final time, then snapped off the light. In the darkness, the snow whispered against the panes like 1,000 conspirators. Chapter 2. The Midnight Storm. The storm arrived with the suddenness of a coup de théâtre. One moment, the great house stood in crystalline silence. The next, the wind flung itself against the walls like a mad thing, rattling the leaded casements and driving snow in horizontal sheets across the park. By 10 o'clock, the world beyond the windows had vanished, replaced by a white maelstrom that swallowed sound and light alike. The telephone wires sang a high metallic keen. The generator in the stable yard coughed once, twice, then steadied into a sullen thrum. In the drawing room, the fire had been built up to a roaring blaze, but the warmth reached only a few feet before the cold clawed it back. The party had fragmented after Sir Reginald's theatrical collapse. Lady Evelyn, pale and trembling, had retired with a migraine and a hot water bottle. Geoffrey had slunk off to the billiard room, cue in one hand, whisky in the other. Langford and Dr. Crow lingered over brandy and cigars, their conversation a low, dangerous rumble. Miss Thorne, dismissed with a curt nod, vanished toward the servants' stair. Poirot and Hastings remained by the hearth. The little Belgian sat very upright in a tapestry wing chair, his small hands folded over the head of his cane, eyes half closed like a cat pretending sleep. Hastings poked the logs and watched sparks spiral up the chimney. "Devilish business, Poirot," he said at last. "Sir Reginald's stunt has set everyone on edge." "If there really is a poisoner, there is," Poirot interrupted softly. "Of that I am certain. But tonight's performance was instructive. Observe, when Sir Reginald died, who moved first to help? Dr. Crow, professional instinct or guilty knowledge, who looked relieved? Mr. Langford, momentarily before he masked it. Who wept? Only Miss Thorne, though she was not in the room. And Lady Evelyn, her hysteria was genuine, but was it fear for her husband, or fear that the game had gone too far? Hastings frowned. You think she was party to the charade? I think nothing, yet, I observe. Poirot's gaze drifted to the long windows. Snow had already piled against the sills in soft, treacherous drifts. Come, mon ami, let us take the temperature of the house. They moved through the corridors like conspirators. The portraits seemed to lean inward. The suits of armour glinted with malevolent life. From the billiard room came the sharp clack of ivory balls, and Geoffrey's slurred laughter. In the library, Langford's voice rose in anger. I'll have my share, Reggie, or the ministry hears everything. Cut short as the door slammed. Upstairs, the guest wing was hushed. A sliver of light showed beneath Dr. Crow's door. The faint scent of carbolic drifted into the passage. Lady Evelyn's room was dark, but a faint whimpering, like a small animal in pain, escaped as they passed. Miss Thorne's attic door at the far end was locked. Poirot paused on the landing. The house sleeps uneasily, and the storm, it is our ally and our enemy. It isolates us, yes, but it also covers tracks. They descended the main staircase. The great hall clock struck 11 with sonorous authority. Meadows, the butler, emerged from the shadows like a well-trained ghost. Sir Reginald's compliments, gentlemen. He begs you will join him in the study, alone. The study was a smaller room off the library, panelled in walnut, warmed by a single coal fire. Sir Reginald stood before a wall safe, concealed behind a false tier of books. He had changed into a smoking jacket of garnet velvet. His face was haggard. "Close the door," he said. "I've been a fool, Poirot. That charade. Someone took it seriously, look." He opened the safe. Inside lay a sheaf of papers and a small velvet box. From the box he took a diamond necklace, flawless stones, old-fashioned setting. Evelyn's family heirloom, gone from her jewel case this evening, and this he held up a single sheet of notepaper. The message was typed. "One more act, and the curtain falls for good. Leave the house or die." "No fingerprints but mine," Sir Reginald said. "Delivered under my door while we were at dinner." Poirot examined the paper beneath a green-shaded lamp. "Common deckle-edged stock, Olympia typewriter, Model 8, I think. The E is slightly raised, and the necklace, returned, you notice, not stolen. A warning, not a theft." Sir Reginald poured himself another whisky with unsteady hands. "I'm keeping the safe locked tonight. I want you and Hastings to take rooms adjoining mine. There's a connecting door. I've dismissed the servants early. No one moves about after midnight." Poirot inclined his head. "Prudent, but tell me, have you spoken to your son about the forgeries?" Sir Reginald's jaw tightened. "Not yet. Tomorrow, after Christmas." A gust rattled the windows. Somewhere a shutter banged like a gunshot. Sir Reginald started. "Steady," Poirot murmured. "The storm plays tricks." At 11:30, Sir Reginald retired, locking the safe, pocketing the key. Poirot and Hastings took up station in the adjoining dressing room, a Spartan chamber with 2 narrow beds and a shared bathroom. A connecting door, locked, led to the master suite. Midnight came and went. The house groaned under the assault of wind. Hastings dozed, fully dressed. Poirot sat in darkness, ears attuned to every creak. At 12:15, a floorboard protested in the corridor. Soft footsteps passed their door, paused, retreated. Poirot's hand closed over Hastings' arm. "Listen!" A faint click, the study door, then silence, broken only by the storm's fury. Poirot rose. "Stay here. Guard the connecting door." He slipped into the corridor. The passage was black as a mine, but a thin line of light showed beneath the study door. Poirot moved like a shadow, pressed his ear to the panel. Inside, a drawer opened, Papers rustled. A metallic snick. The safe. Impossible. Sir Reginald had the key. Suddenly, a woman's scream, sharp, terrified, ripped through the house from the direction of the garden door. Lights blazed on upstairs. Doors slammed. Hastings burst from the dressing room, revolver in hand. "Poirot!" The study door flew open. Sir Reginald stumbled out in pyjamas, face chalk white, clutching his left side. Blood seeped between his fingers. "Gazebo!" he gasped. "Someone! Dagger!" He collapsed. Hastings caught him while Poirot knelt, ripping open the silk pyjama jacket. A single stab wound, just below the ribs, pumped dark blood onto the turkey carpet. "Pressure!" Poirot snapped. "Ring for the doctor!" But Dr. Crow was already thundering down the stairs in dressing gown and slippers, medical bag swinging. Behind him came Langford, Geoffrey, Lady Evelyn, wrapped in a negligee. Miss Thorne, wide-eyed in a chamber robe. Crow knelt, probed, pressed a pad to the wound. "Through the lung! Get him to bed! Hot bottles, brandy! I need light!" Chaos erupted. Footmen appeared with lanterns. Meadows telephoned frantically for the village doctor, though the lines were down. Sir Reginald was carried upstairs, leaving a trail of crimson drops like scattered rubies. Poirot stood alone in the hall, staring at the garden door. It hung ajar. Snow swirled in on an icy blast. Beyond, in the lantern light, a single set of footprints led across the virgin snow to the gazebo, deep, staggered, ending at a dark sprawl against the white. Hastings joined him, revolver still in hand. "Good God, Poirot! He's out there!" "Non!" Poirot's voice was terrible in its calm. "He is here. What lies in the gazebo is already dead." He stepped into the storm, coatless, the wind whipping his scarf like a banner. Hastings followed, boots crunching. The footprints were Sir Reginald's own, recognizable by the square toe cap and the nail pattern on the heel. They led straight to the gazebo, 30 yards distant, and stopped. No return trail marred the snow. In the centre of the little pavilion, Sir Reginald lay on his back, eyes staring sightlessly at the latticed roof, a pearl-handled dagger protruding from his chest. Blood had frozen in a black halo around him. Around the body, the snow was untouched, smooth as fondant. No struggle, no second set of prints. Only Sir Reginald's own tracks leading in, and none coming out. Poirot knelt, touched the dagger's handle. From the study collection, and the wound, precise, downward, through the heart, instantaneous. Hastings stared, baffled. "But we just saw him here, bleeding from the side." "Précisément." Poirot rose, eyes glittering like frost. "2 wounds, 2 deaths, 1 man. The storm has delivered us an impossibility, mon ami." And Hercule Poirot does not believe in impossibilities, only in murderers who are very, very clever. Behind them the house lights blazed against the night, but the snow kept falling, thick and silent, erasing the world one secret at a time. Chapter 3. The initial interrogations. The storm had spent its fury by dawn, leaving behind a silence so complete it felt like the hush after a gunshot. Harrington Hall lay entombed in drifts that rose to the ground floor sills. The sky was the colour of tarnished pewter. The village doctor, summoned by a stable boy on skis, would not arrive for hours. Until then, the house was a sealed box, and Hercule Poirot its reluctant locksmith. Sir Reginald's body had been carried to the billiard room, laid on the green baize beneath the gaze of a stuffed tiger, and covered with a Union Jack. Dr. Crow had stitched the side wound on the living Sir Reginald upstairs, pronouncing him weak but lucid. The dagger in the gazebo had been photographed by Meadows, with a box brownie, then wrapped in oilskin. No one had touched the snow. The single set of footprints remained a perfect, damning accusation. At 9 o'clock, Poirot convened the household in the morning room. Sunlight slanted through frost-feathered windows, striking sparks from the chandeliers. The fire crackled. Coffee steamed in Sèvres cups. No one drank. Poirot stood before the Adam mantel, hands clasped behind his back, green eyes moving from face to face like searchlights. Mesdames et messieurs, we face a crime that insults the intelligence. Sir Reginald Harrington was stabbed twice. Once in the side, here in the house at approximately 12:17. Once in the heart, in the gazebo at some later moment. Yet the snow records only one journey. Someone walked out, alive or dead, and did not walk back. We shall discover how, and by whose hand. He began with the timeline, chalking it on a school slate borrowed from the nursery. Poirot tapped the slate. The side wounds bled profusely, yet no blood trail leads to the gazebo. The heart wound killed instantly, yet the victim walked 30 yards after the side wound. Contradictions! We shall resolve them by truth, not by miracles. He summoned them one by one to the library, leaving Hastings to guard the door with a service revolver and a stern expression. Lady Evelyn entered first, wrapped in sable despite the fire. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but her voice steady. I retired at 10:30 with a headache, took a veronal, heard nothing until the scream. My husband was alive at dinner. He carved the beef himself. She twisted a diamond ring. He changed his will last month. I inherit everything. Geoffrey gets nothing unless he reforms. Motive, perhaps, but I loved him, Monsieur Poirot, flaws and all. Poirot noted the tremor in her left hand. And the necklace returned last night? I found it on my dressing table at dawn. No note. Geoffrey slouched in next, reeking of last night's whiskey. His dinner jacket was rumpled, his eyes bloodshot. Father caught me forging checks, threatened to cut me off. Yes, I was in the billiard room until midnight. Langford joined me at 11:50. We argued about shares. I heard the scream, ran out, saw Father bleeding. Thought it was another stunt until I saw the gazebo. He laughed bitterly. I needed money, not a corpse. Poirot's gaze flicked to Geoffrey's shoes, square-toed, identical to the prints. You walked in the corridor at 12:15. Looking for Father's safe key. Didn't find it. Victor Langford strode in like a man entering the ring. His tie was askew, his knuckles bruised. Reggie and I quarrelled publicly about the armaments contract. I say he cooked the books. He says I did. At 12:15 I was in the library burning papers, evidence. Heard the scream, ran. Found Reggie bleeding. I'm no killer, Poirot. I wanted him ruined, not dead. Poirot lifted a charred corner from the wastebasket. These figures, interesting, but not enough to kill for? Langford's smile was wolfish. Wait till the auditors come. Dr. Elias Crowe entered silently, closing the door with surgical precision. His hands were steady, but a pulse beat in his temple. I was in my room reading The Lancet, December issue. Heard footsteps, ignored them. The scream brought me downstairs. I treated the side wound. It was superficial, meant to maim, not kill. The heart wound was professional. Downward thrust, severed aorta. His eyes met Poirot's. 20 years ago, Reggie invested my savings in a fraudulent mine. My wife took her own life. I have hated him every day since, but I did not kill him. Poirot leaned forward. Your coat, Docteur. Fibres on the dagger handle match the Harris tweed. Crowe's lips thinned. I lent it to Reggie yesterday. He complained of cold. Miss Clara Thorne came last, twisting a handkerchief to shreds. Her eyes were swollen, her voice barely audible. I was in the still room pressing lavender bags for Lady Evelyn. At 12:15 I went to the kitchen for hot water. Heard a noise in the study, thought it was Sir Reginald. Then the scream, I ran upstairs. She flushed crimson. He promised me a legacy, then withdrew it when he found me in his study. I only wanted to return a letter, private, nothing more. Poirot's voice softened. A letter of affection, perhaps? She nodded, tears spilling. He was kind once, before he grew afraid. Poirot dismissed her gently, then stood alone, arranging his findings like chess pieces. He opened the French windows. The garden lay virgin white, the gazebo a dark scar. Kneeling, he brushed snow from the footprints. The left heel dragged slightly. Sir Reginald favoured his right leg after an old hunting injury, but the depth, deeper than a man of Sir Reginald's weight should make. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Ah, the plot thickens. Returning indoors, he found Hastings in the hall, revolver lowered. Anything? Only this. Hastings held up a blood-stained glove. Left hand, kid leather. Found in Geoffrey's room, stuffed behind the cistern. Poirot turned it over. Size 8. Geoffrey takes 9. And the blood, still tacky. Planted mon ami. A red herring served with English. Mustard. Upstairs, Sir Reginald stirred, calling weakly for Poirot. The little detective mounted the stairs 2 at a time. In the master bedroom, screens shielded the bed. Hot water bottles steamed. Dr. Crow adjusted a morphine syringe. Sir Reginald's face was grey, but his eyes burned. Find him, Poirot, before he finishes the job. Poirot leaned close. Tell me, monsieur, who knew you planned the charade? Only Evelyn and Meadows. He arranged the blank cartridge. Poirot's moustache twitched. And the dagger collection, where is it kept? Study wall, locked cabinet, key on my ring. Poirot straightened. Rest. The little grey cells work better with cooperation. As he turned to leave, Sir Reginald clutched his sleeve. The safe. Check the safe. Poirot descended to the study. The false books swung aside. The safe stood open. Inside, the diamond necklace, the threatening note, and a single sheet missing from the new will. A jagged edge showed where it had been torn out. Poirot closed the safe, pocketing the key Sir Reginald had pressed into his hand. In the corridor, he met Meadows, impassive. The village doctor has arrived, sir, and the police telephoned. They cannot reach us until the ploughs come. Perhaps tomorrow. Poirot nodded. Then tomorrow we dig, for snow and for truth. He returned to the morning room where the household waited, faces pale in the cold light. Outside, the footprints gleamed like a signature. Inside, the clock struck 10. Somewhere in the house, a murderer smiled, certain the snow had buried every trace. But Hercule Poirot smiled too. For the snow, like all perfect things, could not lie forever. Chapter 4. Clues in the Snow. The sun climbed a hand's breadth above the horizon, and hung there, pale and impotent, as though afraid to disturb the white perfection below. Harrington Hall lay in a bowl of silence. Even the rooks had forsaken the elms. At 10:30, Poirot led the household into the garden, a solemn procession in borrowed boots and fur coats. The cold was a living thing, dry, surgical, slicing through wool and flesh to the bone. The gazebo stood at the centre of the lawn, like a small pagan temple. 6 lattice sides, a domed roof crusted with icicles, the body removed but its outline preserved in a rust-brown stain. The single set of footprints arrowed straight from the garden door, 32 yards, 38 paces, ending in a churned hollow where Sir Reginald had fallen. No return marks, no struggle beyond the final collapse. The snow around the pavilion was as smooth as a bridal train. Poirot walked the trail heel to toe, measuring with a silk tape. Hastings followed, revolver tucked inside his coat, breath pluming like a dragon's. "Observe," Poirot said, kneeling at the first print. "Depth, 4 inches. Sir Reginald weighed 14 stone. Yet here he moved to the midpoint 5.5 inches. Deeper. Why?" Dr. Crow, gaunt in a camel hair coat, answered from the rear. "He was bleeding. Blood adds weight." "Non." Poirot brushed snow from the edge. "The side wound bled inside the house. See the carpet? Here, no blood until the end. Something else burdened him." Lady Evelyn shivered. "A rucksack? A burden of guilt?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Guilt leaves no imprint, madame, but guilt may carry another." He reached the gazebo. The dagger's slot in the snow had been filled with fresh powder. The stain beneath was frozen hard. Poirot scraped with a silver fruit knife. Beneath the crust lay a thin layer of crimson ice. Then something darker. He lifted it carefully. A single copper coin, 1935 penny, frozen into the blood. "Curious," he murmured. "Dropped by the victim? Or the killer?" Geoffrey snorted. "Father never carried coppers. Said they bulged the pocket." Langford turned the coin over. "Mint, straight from the bank." Miss Thorne hung back, eyes fixed on the stain as though mesmerized. Poirot noticed, filed it away. They returned via the conservatory, a glass tunnel of frost ferns and dying palms. Poirot paused at the garden door. The threshold was wet, melted snow forming a small pool. He dipped a finger, tasted. "Salt," he announced. "Coarse rock salt. Sprinkled here. When?" Meadows, trailing behind, cleared his throat. "I laid salt at 9 last evening, sir, to keep the step from icing. The storm covered it again." Poirot nodded. "Then the killer crossed after the salting, but before the heavy fall, between 10 and midnight." Inside, the study awaited. The wall cabinet that housed the dagger collection stood open. Its key dangled from the lock. 8 blades remained, Spanish, Indian, Malay, but the central slot gaped empty. Poirot lifted each weapon, examining the velvet lining. "Dust," he said, "all but the missing dagger. It was cleaned recently, and see," he pointed to a faint scratch on the cabinet door. "Pried with a thin blade, a chisel, or another knife?" Hastings opened the desk drawers. The torn will lay where the safe had yielded it. The missing page was still absent, but beneath a blotter lay a folded scrap, cheap notepaper, the kind sold in village shops. "Meet me gazebo, 11:45. Come alone or the letter goes to your wife." See Poirot's eyebrows rose. "Initial C Clara, Crow, or a clever forgery?" Upstairs, Sir Reginald had been moved to a sitting position, swathed in blankets, a hot brick at his feet. His colour was better. The side wound wept only clear fluid now. Lady Evelyn hovered with barley water. Poirot dismissed the others, closed the door. "Monsieur, the note, your handwriting." Sir Reginald stared at the scrap. "No, but the initial, Clara wrote to me once, same paper." "And the meeting?" "I never received this. At 11:45 I was in the study, locking the safe." Poirot produced the penny. "This was under your body." Sir Reginald frowned. "I cashed a cheque yesterday. Fivers and sovereigns, no pennies." Poirot pocketed the coin. "Rest. We progress." In the corridor, he met Miss Thorne descending with an empty tray. She startled at his sudden appearance. "Mademoiselle, the note, your paper." She flushed. I buy it at the post office. Dozens do." "And the legacy Sir Reginald withdrew?" Her eyes filled. "He found me returning a letter. Thought I stole it. I only wanted to give it back. He was kind once, before the fear ate him." Poirot's voice softened. "The letter was from you?" She nodded, miserable. "A folly. I burned the reply." Downstairs, Poirot gathered the men in the gun-room. Racks of Purdy's gleamed. The air smelled of gun oil and cedar. He laid the penny on the baize table. "Someone brought this from the village yesterday. Who?" Langford shrugged. "I banked in town. Received sovereigns." Geoffrey laughed. "I'm usually broke. No pennies." Dr. Crow turned the coin over. "I treated a child for croup. Mother paid in coppers. I may have one." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "You left the house yesterday?" "Briefly. Skis from the stable. Needed air." A new avenue. Poirot filed it. Lunch was a silent affair. Cold meats, pickles, no one hungry. Afterward, Poirot and Hastings repaired to the conservatory with measuring tape and magnifying glass. The salt pool had frozen into a glassy sheet. Beneath it, faint scratches radiated outward like claws or poles. Poirot lay prone, breath fogging the pane. See, 2 parallel lines 18 inches apart, then nothing, the storm filled them. Hastings squinted. "Ski tracks? Too narrow, and no return." Poirot rose, brushing snow from his coat. "But suggestive." In the boiler room they found the unexpected. A pair of bamboo poles, tipped with iron, leaning behind the coal chute. Fresh mud clung to the tips, one bore a dark smear. "Blood?" Hastings whispered. Poirot scraped with a penknife. "Varnish. New. These are not garden tools." Upstairs, Dr. Crow's door stood ajar. Inside, the Harris tweed coat hung on a chair. Poirot lifted it. Fibres matched the dagger handle. But in the pocket, a crumpled sheet, the missing will page. It bequeathed $10,000 to my faithful companion Clara Thorne. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Planted again. The killer grows careless, or desperate." He returned the page, left the coat undisturbed. In the hall, Meadows intercepted him. "Telephone lines are up, sir. Constable arrives at 4, and," he lowered his voice, "Sir Reginald asks for you urgently. He remembers something." In the master bedroom, Sir Reginald was propped higher, eyes fever-bright. "The safe," he rasped. "After I locked it, I heard a noise. Behind the panelling, a rat, I thought. But now there's a priest hole. My grandfather showed me. Entrance in the chimney." Poirot's pulse quickened. "Show me." With Hastings's help, they shifted the bed. Behind the headboard, a section of oak swung inward on concealed hinges. A narrow passage, thick with cobwebs, descended into darkness. At the bottom, a small chamber stone-flagged. On the floor lay a woman's kid glove, right hand blood-stained, and a single copper penny, bent as though stepped on. Poirot picked it up. "The mate to our gazebo coin. And the glove, size 6. Lady Evelyn's." Sir Reginald stared. "Evelyn's hands are larger. Clara's, perhaps." Poirot's mind raced. Priest hole to chimney to study, then to garden door. But the snow. He climbed back, closed the panel. The house itself is the accomplice, but the snow remains the perfect witness. Outside, the light began to fail. The footprints still mocked them, serene and solitary. Poirot stood at the window, watching shadows lengthen across the lawn. "Tomorrow," he said softly, "we dig, not for the body, for the truth beneath the truth." Behind him, the fire settled into dull red embers. Somewhere in the house, a clock chimed 3. The constable was 1 hour away, and the killer knew it. In the silence, Poirot heard the faint rhythmic creak of a floorboard overhead. Someone pacing, waiting for night. Chapter 5. Red herrings abound. The constable never arrived. At 4:30, the telephone rang once, then fell silent. The exchange reported lines down again and a fresh snow. Harrington Hall was sealed for another night, a crystal sphere with murder at its heart. Poirot received the news with a philosophical shrug. Bon, the little grey cells prefer an uninterrupted stage. He spent the afternoon in the priest hole, crawling on hands and knees with an electric torch, emerging powdered with soot and triumph. The passage linked study to master bedroom to a disused flue that vented behind the conservatory boiler. A determined child, or a slight adult, could traverse it in minutes. But the garden door remained the only exit to the snow, and the footprints had not multiplied. At 5 o'clock, he summoned the household to the long gallery, a cavernous room lined with Harrington ancestors whose painted eyes seemed to follow every gesture. A single lamp burned. Shadows pooled in the coffered ceiling like ink. "We advance," Poirot announced, placing objects on a velvet cloth. The 2 pennies, the kid gloves, left from Geoffrey's room, right from the priest hole, the torn will page, the bamboo poles, the salt-crusted note initialed C. Each is a red herring, yet each contains a grain of truth. We shall fillet them. He began with Geoffrey. The young man stood beneath a portrait of his great-grandfather in hussar uniform, looking suddenly boyish. "The left glove in your cistern, blood group O, Sir Reginald's type. Yet the stitching is new, the leather uncreased. Purchased when?" Geoffrey flushed. "Fortnum's, last week. Pair for the opera. Someone pinched the mate." Poirot turned to Lady Evelyn. "And the right glove from the priest hole. Your monogram, madame?" She touched the tiny embroidered E. "Mine, yes. I lost it days ago. Thought the laundry. Found beside a bent penny. Curious laundry." Poirot laid the coins side by side. Both 1935, both minted in Lantrissant. Yet one is pristine, one crushed. The crushed was stepped on, inside the house. The pristine fell in the gazebo. 2 journeys, perhaps. Langford snorted. Or 2 killers. Dr. Crow's voice cut like a scalpel. Or 1 killer planting decoys. The bamboo poles, ski sticks without skis. I used them yesterday to cross the drift to the village, left them in the boiler room. Poirot's eyes gleamed. And the varnish smear, blood? Tree sap, from the yew by the gate. Miss Thorne twisted her handkerchief. "The note on cheap paper. Anyone could buy it. I wrote Sir Reginald once, yes, but burned his reply. Someone kept the blank sheets from my drawer." Poirot lifted the salt-crusted note. "Written on a typewriter, with a raised E, the estate office machine. Who has access?" Meadows stepped forward. "All of us, sir. I type the household accounts." Poirot nodded. "Then the net spreads wide." Dinner was a travesty. Consommé untouched, pheasant congealing in aspic. Conversation died stillborn. Afterward, Poirot stationed Hastings at the garden door with a storm lantern and strict instructions, no one to pass. He himself took the study, door locked, revolver on the blotter. At 10 the house lights dimmed, generator coughing again. In the flicker, shadows lengthened into accusation. Poirot sat motionless, ears straining. At 10:20, a soft scrape sounded behind the panelling. He rose silently, torch ready. The priest hole panel eased open. A figure emerged, small, cloaked, face obscured by a silk scarf. It moved toward the desk, hand outstretched for the revolver. Poirot switched on the lamp. "Bonsoir, Mademoiselle Thorne." She froze, scarf slipping. Her eyes were huge, pupils dilated with terror or belladonna. I heard a noise," she whispered. "From the priest hole." Poirot's voice was gentle. "You have been busy, no? The gloves, the pennies, the note, all to point suspicion elsewhere. But why?" She sank into a chair, trembling. "He was going to expose me. The letter I burned wasn't the only one. There were photographs. He kept them in the safe. I wanted them back." Poirot opened the safe. Still locked, contents intact. "No photographs, mademoiselle. Only the will page you yourself tore out earlier, planted in Dr. Crow's pocket to frame him." Her sob was half relief, half despair. "Then I'm not the killer? No, merely a thief of reputations. Return to your room. We speak again tomorrow." She fled. Poirot relocked the safe, then examined the priest-hole entrance. Fresh scratches on the brass catch. File marks. Someone else had used it recently. At 11, Hastings telephoned from the garden door. "Movement, Poirot. Footprints, new ones, leading from the conservatory to the gazebo. Then back, but shallow. Almost as if the return was made by someone lighter." Poirot finished. "Or carrying less. I come." They met in the conservatory. The new tracks were faint, overlaid on the old, but unmistakable. A narrow boot, size 6, heel sharp. They led to the gazebo, circled the bloodstain, returned. Yet the return prints barely dimpled the surface crust. Hastings stared. "Impossible. Same person, half the weight coming back." Poirot knelt, brushed snow. Beneath the shallow return lay deeper impressions, wide, rectangular, like a ladder laid flat. "Sledge," he said softly. The killer dragged the body out on a sledge, walked beside it, hence the narrow prints. On the return the sledge was empty, lighter, but where is it hidden? They followed the faint drag marks to the garden shed. The door hung ajar. Inside, a child's toboggan, varnished pine, rope handle, stood propped against seed trays. Fresh snow clung to its runners. Hastings whistled. "Sir Reginald, 14 stone, on that. Wrapped in a rug, perhaps." The side wound bled on the rug, not the snow. The heart wound delivered in the gazebo. Post-mortem. "But he was alive when I carried him upstairs." "No. You carried a man already dying. The heart wound hidden beneath the dressing gown. The side wound was the decoy, to bring us running inside while the body was arranged outside." Poirot's torch swept the shed. On a shelf lay a bundle. Blood-soaked rug, pearl-handled dagger cleaned of prints, and tied with string, a woman's kid glove, right hand monogrammed E. "Another plant," Poirot murmured. "But whose?" Footsteps crunched behind them. Lady Overlyn stood in the doorway, face pale as moonlight. "I followed the lantern. Is it over?" Poirot studied her boots, size 6, sharp heel. "Almost, madame. One question. Why did you salt the conservatory step at 9 last night?" "I didn't. Meadows did. Meadows salted the garden door. The conservatory was untouched, until someone needed a clear path for the sledge." Her hand flew to her throat. "You cannot think." "I think nothing. I deduce. Return to the house. Lock your door." She obeyed, skirts trailing like a ghost. Back in the study, Poirot laid out the new evidence: toboggan, rug, glove. Then he opened the dagger cabinet. The Malay crease beside the empty slot bore a hairline crack, fresh. "Someone tested the blades," he said, "chose the lightest for the task." Hastings rubbed his temples. So the killer stabbed Sir Reginald in the study, side wound, then dragged him out on the toboggan, stabbed the heart in the gazebo, returned lightweight. But Sir Reginald was seen alive after the side wound. Seen by whom? Dr. Crow, who pronounced the side wound superficial. Langford, arguing shares. Geoffrey, drunk, all unreliable. The scream, time to bring us running inside. A soft knock. Meadows entered with a salver, hot milk, biscuits, and a folded note. "You have until dawn. Leave or join him." C. Poirot turned the paper to the firelight. Same typewriter, same raised E. But the ink was fresh, still tacky. "Written tonight," he said. "The killer grows bold." He dismissed Meadows, then stood at the window. The new footprints were already filling with drifting snow. Somewhere in the house, a door closed soft as a sigh. "Tomorrow," Poirot said, "we set the trap. The red herrings have served their purpose. They have shown us the hand that casts them. Now we bait the hook with the one thing the murderer cannot resist, the truth." He extinguished the lamp. In the dark, the study clock ticked like a heartbeat. Outside, the snow resumed its silent conspiracy. But Poirot's eyes burned green in the ember glow, fixed on the invisible path that led from house to gazebo and back again, on the back of a child's toy and a murderer's desperation. Chapter 6. The Detective's Method. The second night pressed against Harrington Hall like a white glove over the mouth. At 9 o'clock the generator surrendered with a final wheeze. The great house plunged into candle-lit darkness. Shadows leapt across oak panelling. The wind prowled the chimneys like a hunting pack. Poirot had ordered every candle, lamp and torch gathered into the great hall. The household sat in a ragged circle, faces flickering, Lady Evelyn clutching rosary beads, Geoffrey nursing a brandy balloon, Langford cleaning his nails with a penknife, Dr. Crow staring into the fire as though reading omens, Miss Thorne twisting the hem of her apron, though she wore none. Poirot stood beneath the minstrel's gallery, a small, immaculate silhouette against the Christmas tree's dying candles. "Order and method," he declared, voice crisp as frost. "Tonight we reconstruct the impossible crime. Captain Hastings, the screen." Hastings dragged a Japanese lacquer screen to the centre, creating a makeshift stage. On a table, he laid the toboggan, the blood-soaked rug, the dagger, the 2 gloves, the pennies, the torn will page, the salt-crusted note. Poirot arranged them with the precision of a jeweller. Scene: the study, 11:45. Sir Reginald locks the safe, pockets the key. He hears a noise behind the panelling. He opens the priest hole. Poirot stepped behind the screen. Enter the killer, small, silent, familiar. A gloved hand offers the note, "Meet me gazebo." Sir Reginald hesitates, then Poirot mimed a lunge. The side wound, superficial, meant to stun and bleed. The rug is thrown over him, the toboggan waiting outside the conservatory door. Drag marks hidden by salt melted into slush, then refrozen. He pulled the rug across the floor. The toboggan glided smoothly. 32 yards. The body is arranged in neos, the gazebo. The heart wound, post-mortem, delivered with the pearl-handled dagger. The killer returns, toboggan empty, prints shallow. Inside, the side-wounded Sir Reginald staggers into the hall, timed for the scream. But who played the living ghost? Geoffrey laughed nervously. Father himself, another charade? No. Sir Reginald was already dead. The ghost was the killer in his dressing gown, padded to match bulk, face obscured by pain and shadow. Dr. Crow's treatment concealed the heart wound beneath bandages. We carried a corpse upstairs. Dr. Crow rose, eyes blazing. "You accuse me of collusion." "I accuse the facts," Poirot replied. "You pronounced the side wound non-fatal. You kept us from full examination. Why?" Crow sat slowly. "Professional caution." Poirot continued. "The red herrings were scattered to confuse. Glove in Geoffrey's room. Will page in your pocket. Note initialed C. But the snow—" He swept an arm toward the windows. "The snow is honest. It records weight, direction, timing. The toboggan explains the impossible return. The priest hole explains access. The salt explains the clear path. All that remains is motive, and the hand small enough to fit the size 6 glove." He turned to Miss Thorne. "Mademoiselle, your boots, size 6. The shallow return prints match. You knew the priest hole from childhood games with Geoffrey. You typed the note on the estate machine. You planted the evidence." She shrank back. I only wanted the photographs. He kept them in the safe. I never— Lady Evelyn's voice cut like crystal. Photographs? Of Clara and my husband? I burned them weeks ago. There were none left. Miss Thorne's sob was raw. Then why threaten me? Poirot's eyes softened. Because the killer needed a scapegoat. Someone small, desperate, obvious. Langford leaned forward. Then who dragged 14 stone on a child's toboggan? Poirot lifted the rug. Beneath lay a folded canvas sling, gardener's litter for moving logs. Light when empty, strong when loaded, found in the boiler room, blood on the straps. He produced a final object. A child's wooden stilt, one of a pair, iron-tipped, varnish fresh. From the attic, height 5 feet. The user walks above the snow. Prints faint, easily filled by drift. The mate is missing. Dr. Crow's face drained of colour. Those were mine, music hall days before medicine. I kept them for sentiment. Sentiment, Poirot echoed. Or rehearsal. You skied to the village yesterday, established the poles. You salted the conservatory step at 9, cleared the path. You used the priest hole nightly, scratches on the catch. You stabbed Sir Reginald in the study, dragged him out, delivered the heart wound, returned on stilts, prints erased by wind. You played the wounded Sir Reginald. Padding, makeup, morphine to dull the voice. You planted the evidence too. Frame Clara, Geoffrey, Langford, anyone but yourself. Crow stood swaying. You have no proof. Poirot held up the stilt. Your height, 6'2". On stilts, 6'7". The gazebo roof beam bears a fresh gouge at that height. Iron tip, and your coat pocket. He produced a crumpled photograph. Crow's wife, young, smiling. On the back, in Sir Reginald's hand, forgive me. Found in the priest hole. You carried it always. It fell during the struggle. Crow lunged for the dagger. Hastings intercepted, revolver steady. The doctor subsided, hands trembling. Reggie ruined us, he whispered. The mine, the bankruptcy, her suicide. I waited 20 years. The war contracts were my chance. Blackmail him into restitution. He laughed, said the past was buried, so I buried him. Silence fell, broken only by the wind. Lady Evelyn crossed herself. Geoffrey stared at the floor. Miss Thorne wept quietly. Poirot signalled Hastings. Lock him in the gun-room. The constable comes at dawn. As Crow was led away, Poirot turned to the others. The method was brilliant. Stilts, toboggan, priest hole, red herrings. But brilliance without conscience is merely clever cruelty. Justice, mes amis, is the only order that endures. He extinguished the candles one by one. The Christmas tree lights guttered. The ancestors faded into darkness. Outside, the snow had stopped. Moonlight silvered the lawn, revealing the faint telltale scars where stilts had walked and a toboggan had glided. The footprints were gone, but the truth remained, etched in iron, blood, and the unyielding memory of Hercule Poirot's little grey cells. Chapter 7. Twists in the Dark. The confession should have ended it. Instead, it cracked the case wide open. Dr. Crow sat in the locked gun-room, wrists bound with Hastings' indecision rather than rope, while the house exhaled a collective breath. Poirot, however, did not exhale. He stood in the great hall at 2 a.m, candle in hand, staring at the Christmas tree as though it had insulted him. The tinsel glinted like a snare. No, he muttered. It is too neat, too theatrical. A doctor who keeps music hall stilts for 20 years? A photograph conveniently dropped in the priest hole? And the toboggan? Why leave it in the shed for us to find? Hastings, half asleep on a settle, stirred. You think Crow is lying to protect someone? I think Crow is lying to protect Crow, But the lie is a mask, and beneath the mask is another mask. Come." They climbed the main staircase, boots muffled on the runner. The house was restless. Boards creaked, pipes knocked, the wind still prowled. At the master bedroom door, Poirot paused. Inside, Sir Reginald's bandaged form lay motionless beneath the tester. Lady Evelyn dozed in an armchair, rosary coiled like a serpent in her lap. Poirot touched her shoulder. She woke with a start. "Monsieur?" "Madame, your husband's dressing gown. Where is it?" "In the dressing room. Why?" Poirot crossed to the adjoining chamber. The garnet smoking jacket hung on its valet stand, blood-soaked where the side wound had bled. He lifted it, sniffed, then held it to the candle. A faint, sweet odour, chloroform. "Crow anesthetized the corpse," he said softly, "to keep rigour from setting too soon. But the heart wound, look!" He parted the lapels. Beneath the blood, a second tear, smaller, precise, pierced the silk lining. The heart wound had been delivered through the gown, not under it. "Impossible for a living man to walk 30 yards after such a blow," Poirot said. "Yet the side wound bled inside the house. 2 killers? Or 2 stages?" A floorboard creaked in the corridor. Hastings spun, revolver raised. Miss Thorne stood in her nightgown, eyes wide. "I couldn't sleep. I heard voices." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "You were in the conservatory at 11:40, mademoiselle. You salted the step. Your boots matched the shallow return prints. You dragged the toboggan, but you did not stab." She trembled. "He made me. Said if I didn't, the photographs that do not exist," Poirot finished. "Lady Evelyn burned them. You were the pawn, not the player." He led her downstairs to the gun room. Crow looked up, haggard. "Clara," he said, "I told you to stay clear." Poirot unlocked the door. "You told her many things, Docteur, but the stilts, your height on stilts would leave gouges at 7 feet. The gazebo beam shows marks at 6 feet too. Your height without stilts." Crow's eyes flickered. A miscalculation. Or a substitution. Poirot turned to Miss Thorne. "Who handed you the toboggan?" She whispered, "Geoffrey. He said Dr. Crow needed help moving something heavy. I thought medicine chests." Geoffrey, roused from the billiard room, arrived dishevelled and furious. "This is absurd. I was drunk enough to follow orders," Poirot said. "You salted the conservatory step at 9, using the estate machine to type the note. You knew the priest hole from childhood. You stabbed your father in the study, side wound, to lure us inside. Clara dragged the body out. You followed on stilts. Your height with stilts matches the beam gouge. You delivered the heart wound in the gazebo, returned lightweight." Geoffrey laughed, but it cracked. "Prove it." Poirot produced the second stilt from the attic trunk. "Your initials, G.H., carved inside the strap, and the dagger cabinet, your fingerprints on the kriss beside the empty slot. You tested blades. Geoffrey lunged. Hastings wrestled him down." Lady Evelyn appeared in the doorway, face ash-white. "My son," she said faintly. "You killed him for the will?" Geoffrey spat. "He was cutting me off. Langford offered a loan, against my inheritance. Father found out. Said he'd ruin us both. Langford summoned, arrived in shirt sleeves. The boy's lying. I offered partnership, not murder." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Then explain the missing bonds from the safe. $50,000, found in your room, monsieur, beneath the mattress." Langford paled. "Planted. Like the will page in Crow's pocket? Like the glove in Geoffrey's cistern? The killer plants evidence like a gardener sows seeds. But seeds grow, and the crop is truth. He assembled them in the study. Geoffrey bound, Langford sweating, Crow silent, Clara weeping, Lady Evelyn rigid. The candle guttered. Dawn was still hours away. Poirot laid out the final pieces. The crime required 3. Geoffrey to stab and inherit, Langford to finance and profit, Crow to conceal and revenge. Clara was the tool, threatened, coerced. The side wound inside, the heart wound outside, the toboggan, the stilts, the salt, all shared. The red herrings were scattered to divide suspicion. Langford cracked first. It was Geoffrey's idea. He said the old man was insured for a fortune. I only agreed to hide the bonds. Geoffrey snarled. You wanted the contracts. Crow wanted blood. Crow spoke at last. I wanted justice. They offered it gift-wrapped. Poirot turned to Lady Evelyn. And you, madame, you knew? She met his gaze steadily. I suspected. When the necklace returned, when the will page vanished, I said nothing, hoping it was a nightmare. Poirot nodded. Silence is complicity, but the law will judge. He signalled Hastings. Lock them in separate rooms. At dawn, the constable. As they were led away, Poirot stood alone in the study. The safe stood open. The bonds were gone. Langford had passed them to Geoffrey in the scuffle. Poirot smiled grimly. The grey cells anticipated. He opened the priest hole. Inside, taped to the wall, the bonds, 50,000 neat, and a final note in Geoffrey's hand, for the one who waits. G. Poirot pocketed it. The accomplice who waits, outside. He stepped into the corridor. A shadow detached from the staircase. Victor Langford, free, a pistol in his hand. Smart, Poirot. Too smart. The bonds are mine now. He raised the gun. Hastings' revolver answered from the landing. Langford fell, shot through the shoulder. The bonds scattered like white leaves. Dawn crept grey over the snow. The constable arrived with ploughs and handcuffs. 3 prisoners, 1 wounded, 1 weeping maid, 1 silent widow. The footprints were gone, melted by sun on the conservatory roof. But the truth remained, cold and hard as the iron tip of a stilt. Poirot stood on the steps, watching the police van disappear down the lane. The Christmas tree lights had burned out, the holly withered. He twirled his moustache. Order restored, he said, but the method, Hastings, the method was almost perfect. Almost. Chapter 8. Gathering Evidence. The house woke to a sky the colour of wet ash. Snow slid from the eaves in heavy slabs, exposing black slate and the raw bones of winter. By 8 o'clock the local constable, a Sergeant Bliss with a walrus moustache and the resigned air of a man who preferred poachers to murder, had taken statements, sealed the gun-room, and telephoned for Scotland Yard. The inspector would arrive by noon, weather permitting. Until then, Harrington Hall remained Poirot's laboratory. He began with the conservatory. The salt path had melted into a glassy streak. Beneath it, the faint parallel grooves of the toboggan runners glinted like silver scars. Poirot measured them with calipers, 32 inches apart, exactly the width of the child's sled. He scraped a sample of the frozen slush, rock salt mixed with garden lime. Someone had raided the potting shed. In the shed itself, the toboggan stood innocent among rakes and flower pots. Poirot turned it over. On the underside, a fresh gouge, pearl handle of the dagger catching as the body was unloaded. A single strand of garnet silk clung to the splinter. Sir Reginald's dressing gown. He pocketed it. Hastings, detailed to the priest hole, emerged soot-streaked and triumphant. Found this wedged behind a loose brick. He held up a woman's silk stocking, laddered and stained with dried blood. Size small, Clara's, or Lady Evelyn's, Poirot murmured. Both wear French silk. We shall test. They moved to the study. The dagger cabinet yielded more. The Malay kris beside the empty slot bore a microscopic chip, matched the gouge on the toboggan. The lock showed pry marks, thin, precise, made by a surgical scalpel. Dr. Crow's bag, left in the hall, contained just such an instrument, blade flecked with dried blood. Upstairs, Sir Reginald's bedroom told its own story. The bedclothes were rumpled on one side only. The pillow bore a faint indentation and a trace of brilliantine, Geoffrey's brand. The dressing-gown, still damp, had been folded with military neatness, Langford's habit. The morphine syringe on the nightstand was empty, the dose sufficient to quiet a dying man for hours. Poirot opened the priest-hole panel. Inside, the air was colder, stale with centuries of secrets. On the stone floor lay a single copper penny, bent as though crushed under a boot heel. Beside it, a scrap of paper torn from the estate typewriter. 11:45, gazebo or the Bondsburn. The E was raised, same machine. In the gun-room, the prisoners sat in sullen silence. Geoffrey nursed a swollen jaw. Langford's shoulder was bandaged. Crow stared at the wall as though reading invisible diagnoses. Clara Thorne had been given tea and a blanket. She clutched it like a shield. Poirot entered with the stocking, the penny, the note. Monsieur, mademoiselle, the net closes. The toboggan, the stilts, the salt, the priest-hole, all used, but the symphony required 4 instruments. He laid the evidence on the baize table. Geoffrey, you forged the note, lured your father to the study. You stabbed the side wound, superficial, to bleed and confuse. You knew the priest-hole from boyhood. Geoffrey sneered. Prove it. Poirot produced the stilt. Your initials, G.H., carved inside. The bim gouge at 6'7", your height on stilts. The brilliantine on the pillow. You lay in wait upstairs, ready to play the wounded man. Langford shifted. He's guessing. No. The bonds, 50,000 pounds, found in your mattress, monsieur. Your fingerprints on the wrapper. You financed the murder for the contracts. Langford's bravado cracked. The old man was bankrupt. I only took what was owed. Crow spoke softly. And I took what was owed in blood. The scalpel is mine. I taught Geoffrey the thrust, heart, instant. I anesthetized the corpse with morphine. I pronounced the side wound non-fatal to buy time. Clara's voice was a thread. They made me drag the toboggan, said they'd ruin me. The stocking, they tore it from my leg to bind his lordship's arms. Poirot turned to her. And the shallow return prints, your boots, size 6. You walked back alone, toboggan empty. She nodded, tears falling. I thought it was a prank, until the blood. Poirot gathered the threads, the plan. Geoffrey lures, stabs. Clara drags the body out. Langford waits in the gazebo, delivers the heart wound. Crow plays the doctor, conceals the truth. The red herrings, gloves, pennies, notes, scattered to divide us. The stilts to confuse the snow. He paused, but one detail betrayed you. The dressing-gown, buttoned wrong. Sir Reginald was right-handed. Only a left-handed man would button it thus. Dr. Crow. Crow smiled faintly. A flourish. The door opened. Sergeant Bliss entered with 2 constables and, unexpectedly, Inspector Japp from Scotland Yard, snow on his bowler. Lines are up, Japp said. Heard you had a full house, Poirot. Poirot bowed. A quartet, Inspector, and the score is complete. Japp surveyed the evidence, whistled. Toboggan, stilts, priest-hole, music-hall stuff. You'll have them in the dock by Christmas. As the prisoners were led away, Geoffrey cursing, Langford silent, Crow dignified, Clara sobbing, Poirot lingered in the study. He opened the safe one last time. Inside, the diamond necklace gleamed, and beneath it, a final surprise. A sealed envelope addressed to him in Sir Reginald's hand. He slit it open. Poirot, if you read this, I am dead. The attempts were real. The charade was to flush them. Trust no one. The bonds are yours if you bring them to justice. R.H. Poirot pocketed the letter, eyes twinkling. A bonus, Hastings, justice and diamonds. Outside, the sun broke through, turning the snow to a blinding sea. The footprints were gone, melted into rivulets that ran pink where the blood had been. The gazebo stood empty, roof icicles dripping like tears. Lady Evelyn met them in the hall, composed in black. "The will stands," she said. "Everything to charity. Geoffrey disinherited. I leave today." Poirot bowed. "A wise woman, madame. Grief is best borne in motion." As the police van crunched away down the lane, Poirot and Hastings stood on the steps. The Christmas tree was being dismantled. Holly wreaths lay in heaps like battlefield casualties. Hastings shivered. 4 killers, almost Shakespearean. "Non," Poirot corrected, "merely human. Greed, revenge, fear, desperation, old tunes on new instruments. But the little grey cells, mon ami, they never tire of the dance." He twirled his moustache, eyes on the horizon where the snow met the sky in seamless white. Order restored, method triumphant, and now breakfast. Even detectives must eat. Chapter 9. The Confrontation. The great hall of Harrington Hall had never looked more like a courtroom. At 11 o'clock, with the snowplows still grinding in the lane, Poirot transformed the space into a theatre of truth. The Christmas tree was gone. Its stand left a damp ring on the parquet like a bloodstain. Candles were lit in every sconce, throwing hard shadows across the oak. The suspects, 4 prisoners, 1 widow, sat in a semicircle of Windsor chairs, wrists free but ankles tethered by the invisible rope of certainty. Sergeant Bliss and Inspector Japp flanked the doors, notebooks ready. Hastings stood behind Poirot, revolver holstered but hand resting on the butt. Poirot took centre stage beneath the minstrel's gallery. Small and impeccable in charcoal grey, the malachite tie-pin flashing like a verdict. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, voice ringing clear as a bell, "we have played a long charade. The curtain falls now. The crime was not one murder, but a quartet in 4 movements: lure, wound, transport, deception. The score is written in snow, blood, and lies. I shall conduct the finale." He placed the evidence on a baize-covered card table. Toboggan, stilts, scalpel, morphine syringe, bonds, torn will page, 2 pennies, 2 gloves, salt sample, typed notes, dressing gown with wrong buttons, garnet silk thread, chipped kris, laddered stocking, priest hole brick with hidden envelope. Exhibit A, the lure. He lifted the note initialed C. Typed on the estate machine, raised E. Geoffrey wrote it, knowing his father's vanity. Sir Reginald would never ignore a midnight summons from a woman. Geoffrey spat. Circumstantial. Exhibit B, the wound. Poirot held the scalpel. Dr. Crow's instrument, taught to Geoffrey in anatomy lessons years ago. The side wound, superficial right lung graze, meant to bleed and confuse, delivered in the study at 11:47. Crow's lips thinned. Speculation. Exhibit C, the transport. The toboggan glided forward on invisible rails. Clara Thorne, coerced by threats of ruin, dragged the unconscious Sir Reginald, alive but drugged, 32 yards to the gazebo. Shallow return prints, her weight alone. Salt melted the path. Lime masked the blood. Clara sobbed. They said it was a lesson. Exhibit D, the deception. Poirot draped the dressing gown. Buttons reversed. Left-handed work, Dr. Crow again. You padded the corpse, applied stage makeup, injected morphine to slacken features. You played the wounded Sir Reginald for 12 crucial minutes, long enough for us to carry a dying man upstairs, and for Langford to deliver the heart thrust in the gazebo. Langford lunged. Japp restrained him. Lies! Poirot lifted the bonds. 50,000 motive. You waited in the gazebo, dagger ready. You stabbed through the gown. Tear matches the pearl handle. You returned on stilts. Geoffrey's initials, your height with stilts gouging the beam at 6'7". He turned to Lady Evelyn, silent, in black veil. And you, madam, you knew. The necklace returned was your signal. You burned the photographs to protect Clara, but you protected your son longer. Silence is the fifth movement. She lifted the veil. Her eyes were dry. I suspected after the charade. I said nothing. A mother's cowardice. Poirot's voice softened. Cowardice ends here. He signalled Hastings. The reconstruction. Hastings wheeled in a tailor's dummy dressed in Sir Reginald's clothes, bandaged. Poirot demonstrated. The side stab, the rug roll, the toboggan drag, the heart thrust through silk. Each motion precise, timed to the second. 11:45 lure, 11:47 side wound, 11:50 toboggan exit, 11:55 heart wound. 12:17 ghost staggers into hall. 12:25 body discovered, perfect synchrony. Geoffrey laughed wildly. Still no proof. Poirot produced the priest-hole brick. Inside, a wax cylinder, Edison phonograph record, found behind the loose brick. Sir Reginald's voice, recorded secretly weeks ago. If I die, trust Poirot. The quartet plays for my fortune. He suspected all of you. Crow lunged for the cylinder. Hastings blocked him. Japp snapped cuffs. Poirot faced the four. Confess, and the law may temper justice with mercy. Clara broke first. Geoffrey promised marriage if I helped. Langford promised money. Crow promised silence. I dragged the sled. I thought he was only unconscious. Langford followed. The contracts were worthless without control. Geoffrey offered half the estate. I took the bonds as insurance. Crow last, voice steady. Reginald destroyed my life. I taught the boy anatomy for revenge. The heart thrust was mine. Through the gown, instant. Geoffrey alone remained defiant. You'll never prove I wrote the note. Poirot smiled. Your fountain pen, mon ami, Waterman, green marble. Ink matches the note's fresh sample, and the E key on the estate typewriter bears a scratch from your signet ring. Initial G. Geoffrey's defiance crumbled. He was a tyrant. I deserved the title. Lady Evelyn stood. You deserved nothing but shame. Poirot turned to Japp. The quartet is complete. Charges, murder, conspiracy, accessory, the maid, coercion mitigates. Japp nodded. Vans outside, Snows held off. As the prisoners were led out, Clara weeping, Crow dignified, Langford cursing, Geoffrey slumped. The hall emptied. Only Lady Evelyn remained. Veil lowered again. Poirot approached. The will stands, madame. Charity inherits. You are free. She lifted the veil. Free to live with ghosts. Take the necklace, monsieur. Payment for truth. Poirot refused with a bow. Truth is its own reward. Outside, the police van crunched away. The snow had begun again, soft and deliberate, covering the last traces of violence. The gazebo stood empty, roof sagging under new weight. Hastings exhaled. 4 killers, a symphony of greed. Poirot twirled his moustache. Greed, revenge, fear, folly, the oldest orchestra, but the little grey cells, mon ami. They conduct the silence after the storm. He glanced back at the house. In an upper window, a curtain twitched, Lady Evelyn watching the van disappear. Then the curtain fell, and Harrington Hall was still. Chapter 10. The Resolution. The snow stopped at noon, as though the sky itself had signed the verdict. Harrington Hall stood stripped of illusion. Icicles dripped from the gargoyles. The Christmas wreaths sagged like defeated banners, and the gazebo, now roped off by Sergeant Bliss, looked suddenly small and absurd, a child's folly in a grown-up tragedy. Inside, the great hall smelled of cold wax and yesterday's panic. Only 3 remained: Poirot, Hastings, and Lady Evelyn, who had asked to witness the final act. Poirot stood at the card table, evidence now catalogued in neat piles. Inspector Japp had taken the prisoners, the bonds, the phonograph cylinder, and the toboggan as exhibits. The scalpel, stilts, and morphine syringe were sealed in brown paper. The 2 pennies lay side by side, one pristine, one bent, like mismatched eyes. "Before we depart," Poirot said, "one last reconstruction. Not for the police, for the soul of this house." He summoned Meadows. The butler appeared, ramrod straight, eyes red but dry. "Sir Reginald's final letter," Poirot said, producing the envelope from the priest-hole brick. "He wrote it 3 weeks ago, suspecting the quartet. He hired me not merely to investigate attempts, but to prevent murder. I failed in prevention, I succeeded in justice." Meadows bowed. "His lordship said you would, sir. He left instructions." He handed Poirot a second envelope, heavier, sealed in crimson wax with the Harrington crest. Inside, a codicil to the will, witnessed by Meadows and the family solicitor, dated the day of the house party. To Hercule Poirot, for services rendered, the diamond necklace and $5,000. The residue to the Harrington Foundation for War Orphans. My son Geoffrey to receive nothing. My wife to retain. The dower house and 1,000 tolts per annum. Let truth bury the past. Lady Evelyn read it without flinching. "He knew," she whispered, "even then." Poirot placed the necklace in her hands. "Yours by right, madame. The $5,000 I donate to the same orphans. Truth is reward enough." She closed the case with a snap. "Then take this instead." She pressed a small silver key into his palm. "The priest hole. Sir Reginald's private journal. Burn it or read it. The ghosts are yours now." They descended together. The narrow passage smelled of earth and secrets. At the bottom, a leather-bound ledger lay on the stone bench. Poirot opened it by torchlight. Page after page of meticulous entries. Geoffrey's forgeries, Langford's cooked books, Crow's blackmail letters, Clara's desperate pleas, Evelyn's silent complicity. The final entry, dated 22nd December. "If I die tonight, let Poirot finish the symphony. The quartet plays for my blood. Let justice play for theirs." Poirot closed the book. He conducted his own requiem. Back in the hall, Meadows served coffee in silence. Lady Evelyn spoke at last. "I leave at dusk. The dower house is ready. Clara goes with me. She was more victim than villain. The others," her voice hardened, "let the law finish what greed began." Hastings cleared his throat. "And the house?" "Sold. The foundation takes possession in spring. Let children's laughter drown the echoes." Poirot raised his cup. "To absent friends, and to the snow that kept the truth pristine." Outside, the sun broke fully, turning the lawn to a blinding mirror. The gazebo's roof collapsed under melting weight, a soft crunch like a sigh. Poirot and Hastings walked the drive one last time. The footprints, original shallow toboggan scars, were gone, replaced by rivulets that ran clear to the gravel. At the gates, the rolls waited, engine purring. Briggs touched his cap. "Station, gentlemen. London," Poirot said, "and warmth." As they drove away, Harrington Hall shrank in the rear window. Tudor brick rosy against white, chimneys no longer smoking, windows blind. A single figure stood on the steps. Lady Evelyn, black veil lifted by the breeze, necklace flashing like a star. Hastings watched her fade. "Will she be all right?" Poirot twirled his moustache. "She has survived worse than murder. She has survived love." The lane curved, the manor vanished. Snow began again, gentle now, a benediction rather than a shroud. Poirot leaned back, eyes half closed. The method, Hastings, brilliant in its parts, flawed in its harmony. 4 minds, 1 crime, yet each betrayed the others. Greed overreached, revenge mistimed, fear confessed, desperation dragged the sled. The little grey cells needed only to listen to the discord. Hastings smiled. And the red herrings? Smoked, filleted, and served with English mustard. The pennies, Clara's village change, and Geoffrey's crushed coin, from the priest hole. The gloves, Lady Evelyn's lost pair, planted to divide. The notes, typewriter and terror. The stilts, Geoffrey's childhood toys, dusted for adult malice, all threads in the same noose. The train awaited at Upper Winchcombe, steam pluming like surrender. They boarded the London Express, found their compartment, drew the blinds against the white world. Poirot produced Sir Reginald's journal from his coat. 1 page only, mon ami. The rest burns tonight. He tore out the final entry, held it to the window. In the winter light, the ink glowed like fresh blood. Truth is the only legacy that cannot be forged. He folded it into his wallet beside the silver key. The whistle blew, wheels turned. Snowfields slipped past, unmarred now, a clean page. Poirot closed his eyes. Justice served, Hastings, and the snow. Ha! The snow keeps its own counsel. The train gathered speed, carrying them south to warmth, to order, to the next impossible crime waiting in the little grey cells of Hercule Poirot.